In the name of God. Hi, here I'd like to introduce the Ingest software, a product of SAAT engineering company. Ingest software is a multi-channel ingest software that can receive multiple inputs in different formats at the same time and save them in different selectable and definable formats in the desired path. It can also stream these inputs with the specifications and formats we define. Now, I'm explaining in more details how to use Ingest. The first step is to select the number of inputs that are displayed to us in the software. Because I had defined a 2x2 environment, when we opened the program, we saw a 2x2 window. But in Edit, then in Setting menu, we can define the number of windows we want. I've already defined a 2x2 window, so we can monitor a maximum of 4 inputs in this environment. There is no limit for monitoring more input numbers. In general, the software can show 3 types of inputs which can be selected here. These inputs can be SDI, NDI, and URL or stream. Now for this tutorial, I've got all 3 types of inputs on the system that I want to use. I connected an SDI signal to the mini recorder card on the server. I assign this input for this window. This input is HD, so here I select the HD 1080-50i option. The input sound is 2-channel, so here I select 2-channel sound. By setting these items and hitting the initialize button, the input display starts in the desired window. In output format part, we must set the desired output type in terms of SD or HD and the number of channels and the sound quality. So far, I have set up one of the windows. Now to specify the saving format of this input, I'm referring to the name of the input that is shown here. And by right-clicking on it and hitting Configuration, this window opens. In this window, I right-click on the input name, and by clicking the Add Encoder option, I can set the desired encoder here. In this part, a series of profiles for the encoder are already defined that can be selected, or we can define a new encoder and add it to this list. I've chosen the MP4 format as the first example. The video and audio bitrates are already defined in it, and of course, it can be changed. By clicking the Save button, an encoder item is added here. As you can see here, the structure is a tree structure. I can add and define another encoder for this input again. It means, in addition to the MP4 format, which is defined earlier, I also add an MPEG-2 50M422 format or encoder. Now there are 2 encoders in the tree for this input. In fact, this input can be used in 2 formats at the same time. For example, in cases when we want to record at the same time with high resolution and low resolution, this method can be used. Although in practice, 2 qualities are usually considered. You can define more encoders in the software if needed. It should be noted the number of encoders that we can use in the software depends on the purchased license. When we want to record the input with adjusted quality, we just do right-click on the desired encoder and select the Add Destination option in this environment and set the desired path for saving. For example, I select this path and finally the CH1 folder as the recording path. So this input will be saved in this quality and format in this path. Of course, setting the extension is also necessary in this environment, and setting the rest is not mandatory. Since my desired format was MP4, I'm writing the MP4 extension here. If we want a phrase to appear at the beginning of all saved files name, we write the phrase here in fixed label. For example, I write this phrase. Now by setting this number, max root size, we specify the maximum size of the total files in this folder. For example, I set 1000 GB here, and whenever the size of files in the folder wants to be more than 1 TB, the program deletes the older files. As the next possibility of the program, it can create some subfolders that are named by date in the main folder and insert the recorded files into the subfolders. For example, I write here as a subfolder naming template, 4Y letters for the year, 2M letters for the month, and 2D letters for the day in capital letters. And here, for defining files naming template based on time, I write 2H letters, 2M letters, and 2S letters in lowercase. By hitting the Save button, our settings for the first channel and encoder 1 are completed, and these settings are added to the tree. Notice that we can store files from the same input and encoder in different paths. In different, for one input, both formats and encoders can be multiple, and the storage paths for each encoder can be in numbers. Now I define a path for the next encoder. As I use the same previous input, I do not change the main folder, and here in fixed label, I write ch1-mpg to make these files distinguished from the previous encoder files. I don't change the subfolder and file naming templates, but I change the extension to .mpeg. According to the created tree structure, by hitting the record button, the system starts saving two files in MP4 and MPEG formats at the same time for this input in the set route. Well, this was for the first channel, and in other words, the first input. Now I can define the second input for this window. As we said earlier, we can have three types of inputs on the system. In this window, we had the SDI input. We also have an NDI input signal on our network, so I choose NDI receiver here. By hitting the refresh button, the system and software detects NDI signals, and here by hitting the initialize button, the corresponding image is displayed in the window. Here I choose the desired output type as before. I mean both video output type and audio output type. Here I can add formats. I select a format such as MPEG 250 megabit 422 for this input, and I click the Save button. Also I set the storage path as before. Well, since the input is the second channel, I choose the CH2 path. For other settings, I can adjust as before or not. Well, I set the maximum size of the main folder files to 500 gig. I write the subfolder naming template and the file naming template too. And the most important thing, which is mandatory, is to set extension. I write the MPEG because it's in MPEG 2 format. Well, this was the second channel setting. Now I explain another possibility of the program. This possibility is to generate the stream output as a destination. Here I hit this radio button, and here I select the stream type, which can be UDP or RTMP. So we define a new destination. By tapping this radio button, we select it as a stream. We set the type to be the same UDP. Here we set the sending address as well. By clicking the Save button, a second destination is added. So you see this format with the specifications we save as a file and will stream. For the third input, I select this window, and by clicking the Add Input option, this window gets opened. Now I'd like to explain how to work with the third type of input. On the network, we have a server called SADRA, which is also a product of SAAT company. This server can receive satellite or terrestrial digital channels and stream on the network with various and selectable protocols such as HTTP. Here I enter SADRA server address. I select the fourth server card and its first channel. Oh, there was a last dot. Now I hit the load button. Then the third input, which is the third type, is displayed in the desired window. Then I set the output type, which is POL16 to 9, so I choose this option. Then I choose the format, for instance MXFSD, and assign CH3 as the storage location. I leave the fixed label, the subfolder name template, and the file name template items blank, and just enter .mxf in extension box. Now you can see I have three types of inputs, one SDI, one NDI, and a stream in these three windows. For the first input, we have defined two encoders. The first encoder is MP4 type, and the second encoder is MPEG 2 type. As you know, we have defined a path for each one too. For the second input, which is NDI type, we have defined an encoder, and we set to create a file from this input and also stream it. For the third input, which was a stream, we have defined an MXFSD encoder and commanded to create a file into the desired path. By hitting the record button for each window, files or streams start to be generated according to the setting and paths. This software has also other features and settings that I will explain in other tutorials. Good luck!